What's a piece of advice you've received that initially seemed strange but turned out to be remarkably insightful? Story 1. This is not mine but something I read somewhere. But essentially, a girl was practicing archery and kept messing up, and the instructor told her, "You're failing because you're too focused on the target and not your own actions." She proceeded to say that it was the best life advice she had ever gotten. Story 2. Some people need to be excluded from social plans even if it makes you feel like a bad person. For context, a person in our friend group always killed the vibe and had tantrums, and finally, my friend gave me this advice. She said I was so lovey and caring and inclusive, but that advice. Story 3. When you move, the first thing you set up is your bedroom. When everything is chaos and you're exhausted from moving boxes all day, you have a place to crash that is ready for you. Story 4. My first boss told me just before firing me, "You know how to work efficiently, but you don't know how to look like you are working efficiently." Later in life hit me. People will look for perceived value even more than the real one you give. So my advice in work environments is, look like you are busy. If you finish thing on date, doesn't matter if you needed 2 days and spent 3 on Reddit, like I am just now LOL, or you spent the entire week deep into it. Look busy. Story 5. Comparison is the thief of joy, and likewise, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Stop looking to others to set the rules for your own life and for what happy or successful means, and don't obsess or focus too much on small details when it's the bigger picture that you frame to make a life and what makes work, work. Story 6. If someone is trying to intimidate you, stare at them confidently and say nothing. They will back off. I thought it was the dumbest thing I ever heard. Ended up trying it on the bully at work and she freaked out and avoided me for the next few years we worked together. I use it all the time on people now, Ilmao. Story 7. My ex-wife once told me, buy perfume from a company that makes perfume, meaning clothing companies, actors, etc. might have a perfume brand, but buy perfume from a company for whom that is their primary focus. This advice generalizes nicely to nearly all purchases. Story 8. Run your own race, Bluey. Yeah, I know, total dad answer. I work with students, and so many are comparing themselves to others and listening to misleading advice. I frequently need to remind them they are the only one on their path. Story 9. The chef I worked for let 18-year-old homeless me stay in a room above his garage through the winter. The rental agreement was, just mow the lawn once a week and don't be an asshole. I love that till this day. There's no reason to be an asshole in nearly any situation, so don't be one. Story 10. When I was working as a cashier at a grocery store back in high school, an elderly man I was serving leaned in and whispered to me, never take sleeping pills and laxatives at the same time. Trust me on this. I don't know why he told me this, but I have lived by that advice ever since. Story 11. Best hiring advice I ever got. I can teach anyone a skill. I can't teach them an attitude. It actually doesn't matter that much what a candidate knows or is familiar with, if they're willing and able to learn and can get along. If they can't get along, then it doesn't matter what they know or can do. Story 12. Before I got married, my stepdad advised me to really think it through. My fiance's family was super racist. They were strongly against us being together, and the consequences of them finding out we were dating caused a lot of conflict and pain for my fiance. My stepdad told me, when you marry someone, you usually gain a new family, but if you marry him, you won't have that. He'll lose his family and be alone, and you'll just have us, my family of origin. Think about if he's worth it. I dismissed it at the time because we were so in love. It was us against the world, you know? Now many years have passed and my stepdad was right. It's not something that impacts us daily and we don't regret our relationship, but there are things other people get to have that we don't. Holidays, childcare support. Just having a second set of family members in our lives is something we don't get. And as my righteous anger has faded, it just makes me tired now. Story 13. To be honest, I think everyone gets told at least once in their life to just be yourself. And almost every teenager will do anything to fit in, which usually results in doing the exact opposite. It's only later in life when most people realize that being yourself will indeed make you the happiest. Story 14. From my dad, paraphrasing. Son, you're not good looking and you're no genius. You can either learn to make women laugh or die a virgin. Cue 50 years of dick jokes. He was an asshole, but he was right about this. I'm not handsome and no smarter than most, but I've never lacked female companionship. I believe that one of the reasons my current relationship works so well is that I can still make her laugh. Edit to add, if you can make her laugh, her panties are halfway off already. Story 15. A lot of people don't understand how much work it takes to live a respectable life and to be of no burden to anyone. A random Redditor regarding people who are constantly expecting handouts or hand-holding through every crisis they put themselves into, believing that we are simply privileged to have what we have, ignoring the hard work we've put into having anything at all. It stuck with me for a long time due to its accuracy. Story 16. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for bullies, meaning just because something worked against one bully doesn't mean it will work against another. Most people will advise you to either ignore the bully or face the bully, and then tell you how they or someone they know solved their bully problem. Carefully think before applying their solution because it may not lead to the same outcome. Story 17. When I had my learner's permit to drive, my dad always said, "Drive like you and everyone else has a baby in the car." It was weird to me at the time because I was 15 but made me a pretty cautious driver, because who would want to be responsible for a motor vehicle accident that harms a baby? But the words hit home now because I have a toddler and a baby now. Story 18. My nan always said, "Don't trust someone who doesn't like cats. It means they don't like things they have no control of." She of course didn't mean those with allergies, etc. I never took it seriously until I was older and looked back on ex-BFs and friends. One friend hated cats, eventually blinded one with a BB gun, which is when I unfriended him. He beat his GAF to near death in his late teens. My ex-husband hated cats. After we got married, he turned violent. Another ex-BF hated cats, turned out to be a psycho and stalker. Don't get me wrong, I know plenty of cat lovers can be psychos, but she certainly had a point. Story 19. My mom and some senior relatives told me that your coworkers are not your friends when I first started working. I got along for all my old coworkers very well and hang out. This advice was strange to me in the beginning, but now I totally understand why they said that. Story 20. Kind of specific one. But it's that when you go to college, university, and will be sharing a kitchen with other students, make sure you have your own designated dish towel that only you use. I didn't get why this was a thing until I went. When you're in a shared student house or dorms/halls, nobody takes responsibility for communal things. Dish towels being used by everyone means they basically never get washed, as nobody wants to take the responsibility. They become vile and disgusting. Having your own you hide away is good, as it means you have one that isn't gross and don't have to be the one to always wash all the dish towels, as over time it's annoying as you use up a lot of your own laundry soap. Story 21. Chase rejection. Try to get rejected as much as possible. It's a good tip for PPL with social anxiety and perfectionists who are too afraid to do anything because they're afraid of getting rejected. There's a girl on Instagram who applied to Harvard as a joke and got waitlisted. That story is engraved in my brain for to have the audacity to ask for insane things that you'd never in a million years think you'd get. Go get rejected. Story 22. Take life slowly. There is no need to rush anything. At the end, we all go to the same place, so why rush it? Advice from an old man randomly in one of the freezer aisles at the grocery store. That hit me hard when I got home. I had just gotten kicked out of my house and was with a few roommates and felt left behind on everything due to their lifestyles. Best advice ever. Story 23. When I was training to be a machinist, my instructor told me to use a calculator. He immediately followed it with, "I am not your math teacher and neither is your employer. Your math teacher wanted you to do it by hand to prove that you understood what you were doing and what steps it took to get there. Your employer cares about it getting done quickly and accurately, and that means using a calculator." It was a good lesson about motivation and expectation, when it's tempting to think of a binary right-wrong. Story 24. A piece of advice I received that initially seemed strange was, don't rush to agree, but don't rush to disagree either. At first glance, this advice may seem confusing or even contradictory. However, over time I realized that it is an invitation to be open, to truly listen, and to critically evaluate information before forming an opinion. In a world where we are often encouraged to have quick answers and align with a certain perspective, this advice reminds us that it's okay to take our time to process information and form our own conclusions. This not only helps us avoid judgment errors, but also allows us to develop our critical thinking skills and become better at understanding and navigating the complexity of the surrounding world. This advice, although strange at first, turned out to be remarkably insightful and valuable to me. Story 25. I was GMHR with a manufacturing company a few years back. We were having a huge retention rate in the industry. Even though we were having a good hold in the market, we were not able to find why people were leaving the company, and we were spending a lot of money on hiring and training new employees. It was an alarming situation for me, since we were not able to find the cause. Back in time, I had a teacher in the university who gave us this example during one of his lecture about if there is an alarming rate of employees leaving the company, there are one or two supervisors who could be responsible for that situation. Since it was so particular example about the supervisor could be responsible, and there was no reference quoted, I thought at that time that the information the teacher was giving may not work, and it was just his opinion. I decided to try the teacher's theory, and I started my own investigation. The process was too long since I was having around 56 production units with 56 managers, 100 or so supervisors, and around 9,600 employees. After a few months, I found out few names. There was a small group among senior employees which was responsible for on-job bullying, and which was operated by two of the supervisors who were most senior employees of the company. No one was going against them or filed a complaint against them because everyone knows them, even my boss knew them so well. I decided to address this, so I transferred both supervisors to the units which were located in other cities. I gave them reasons that the management was thinking about expanding the business in those cities, and since they were so productive, management decided to give them more responsibilities. They agreed to that. After this, I have started firing people who were bullying and threatening other employees. This sent a clear message to all the supervisors, even those two supervisors whom I transferred to remote locations. After few months due to poor performance and few complaints against them, I fired them, and then after I was having almost zero retention rate. My boss was happy with that since we saved a lot of dollar for the company. My teacher's advice worked for me, which I thought it was not useful. Story 26. Weirdly enough, it's a quote from Adventure Time. Sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. Jake. It's not the first time I heard a quote like about not letting failure stop you in your tracks, but it is the version that is stuck in my head. Definitely the type of advice that helped younger me get over the fear of failure. Story 27. I've got a couple that I use often. 1. You can't reason a person out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. This distinction is important if you want any hope of driving towards consensus in differing opinions, actions. And 2. You can't change what people do, but you can change what they know. Helping people understand what consequences / rewards / etc. will come from choices they make about their behavior, and sticking to them when you're the one in control of said outcome is important to have confidence and a clear conscience when dealing with others. Story 28. If you only do the parts, but never the whole, you won't get anywhere. If you only do the whole and never the parts, you'll fail every time. My swim coach said that to me while I was struggling to draw during downtime at championships. I was very confused until I realized she had said that hundreds of times with practice when someone complained about the sets. Didn't realize it works across the board. Story 29. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. I used to believe in giving people another chance. I was young, and in our youth we make simple but sometimes bug mistakes. As you get older, recognize the people you surround yourself are also getting older, and by proxy, should be more mature and rational. When someone harms you or behaves in a disgusting or otherwise bad way, believe them. Did a partner cheat? They're a cheater, and stop pretending they aren't. Did your parents say some blatantly racist crap? They're a racist, and you should stop pretending they aren't. Did your friend act childishly to not getting their way? They're a child, and you should stop pretending they aren't. Story 30. Don't worry about fitting in. People might think you're weird now, but you are becoming interesting. Got this advice as a teenager, and it turned out to be 100% true. When I was supposed to be into drinking and partying and going out, I was making websites and drawing people and writing AI chatbots and creating Duke Nukem 3D maps of my school. Now 20 years later, and I have an interesting career. I'm surrounded by interesting people and have a bunch of different hobbies. Meanwhile, most of the people who are focused on fitting in are the most boring and average people on Earth. You can see it if you're on a dating app. It's a sea of boring people who are all the exact same. And then every now and then there's a real person who lived. Someone who could talk your ear off about something you don't know, who invested the time when they were young to become interesting. Story 31. This isn't exactly advice, but my dad used to talk to me and send me stuff about all these cool technological breakthroughs. I can remember things like smart roads and CRISPR and new solar panel efficiency. And we would talk about the new fusion breakthroughs and just cutting-edge stuff that I like to read about. So, my dad died about 6 months ago, suddenly and awful, and me and my siblings were talking, and we realized he did the same thing to them but more suited to their interests. My sister was all medical stuff, and my brother was all sports. We didn't realize until after he was gone that my dad used to research and read about his children's interests. So he would have stuff to talk about with us, and it kinda wrecked me. My dad was always great, but we never realized just how great he was. So I guess the advice was, get to know your kids, share in their interests. Story 32. If there's a fight at a party but it's broken up and the losers of the fight are kicked out or leave, then you should leave too, even if you weren't involved. 9 times out of 10 they will come back either with backup, weapons, or both. This has happened so many times when I used to go to house parties in my youth. Are those still a thing nowadays? I thought it was silly coming from an old street fighter, but his view was validated when I followed that advice once and learned later on that a guy at the party I was at who got his ass kicked by some roided-up MMA wannabe came back and shot up the place.